Hi, Chris. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you on. We're really excited about the launch of Chorus and the DAC infrastructure that we've been kind of working towards since the inception of the Metis network. So I'm really excited to dive deeper into that. But let's start off by introducing you. Just give us a little bit about your background and kind of what brought you to Web3 and to the Chorus team.
Yeah, sure. So I started off my career as an R&D engineer, mainly focusing in software. And this was for like adjacent industries, such as like the renewable energy sector and such. Um, then during my PhD is when I sort of went down the rabbit hole of Web3, well, crypto to be exact. It was during that time where I really dove into it was 2016, and that was during the whole like um, alternative layer one craze at the time, and also there was a layer two buzz around that time as well, and everything was just pretty. All the hype was off of white papers, um, and there was a load of scams, but there was some really good technology being discussed during that time, and I just found it so fascinating. I would read lots of papers, white papers about these different types of technology and how they would improve global finance and the concept around decentralization and how that increases access and access to resources globally. And it just really stuck with me. So I passively was a researcher since 2016, just observing and trying to understand where the space was going in terms of what problem is it actually going to solve beyond the hype. Around that time, I jumped into startups and I built two venture-backed startups. It was a great time because that's where I got to like learn the whole 0 to 1 product philosophy that I really believe in, and going from nothing and building something up and interacting with users in a almost like 1 to 1 facility. So you're able to talk to the user, really understand why they're using it, what they want to use, and how you can make it better. Uh, that really like just it's a place in software development and product development that I just absolutely love, and it stuck. So after that, around 2021, um, my second startup, we got funding to build a decentralized ads network, and it was originally brought up from my co-founder, who did a deep dive into the decentralized content creation scene. So mainly coming from like Decentraland and all these different metaverse worlds. Um, and there was like there are creators in these spaces who spend a lot of their time just building out assets, creating content in these 3D environments, and trying to build a small micro community around their content. And it was really inspiring to see that these individuals were so committed to these spaces and trying to create content that they believed in and they aligned with and create a community around that. But the issue was they had a hard time making a consistent amount of income from their creations. And although they could like rely on the fluctuation of the Decentraland's assets to sort of uh, use as an income, but that wasn't long term thinking. So we decided that it would be great to build out an advertisement network that allows them to directly monetize from views they get on their in their environment or interactions they get in their environment. And while I was working with the Decentraland SDK and digging deeper into like the Polygon network and Ethereum network, I realized like, wow, it's like now time to build. Like all the code and stuff is like ready for um, application layer. When I first got into the space, there was talks about dApps, but all a single dApp with just even like a million users would crash the system. But during this time, there's all of these scaling solutions now, and the way to interact with different libraries has become so palatable for, I would say, like non non layer one engineers, that it allows you to build applications on top of it in an easier manner. And that's when the light bulb clicked. Like, wow, there's a lot to do in this space. There's a lot to build. There's a lot to investigate, and a lot of the foundation has been developed. And I want to be a part of that. So that's kind of like a good summary of my journey from like beginning to like now. So my last startup, we spun that down. Well, actually what happened was, the startup is going in another direction. It was coming out of the Web3 space, and I didn't want to join that journey, so I left. So we spun down that idea, and I left and looked for the next thing. And during my journey, I applied to a Solidity bootcamp just to like revamp my skills in the Web3 development. It's always good to just, as an engineer, you have to keep learning. And at the end of the boot camp, I got introduced to Pavel. He gave he gave a talk at one of the lectures for the boot camp, and I got introduced to him via the boot camp. And yeah, the conversation went well, and then I met Chelsea, and the rest is history. I guess I joined Chorus, and now I'm on a podcast talking about Chorus.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's all been like pretty recent. You joined the team, and then boom, a lot of things started flowing really quickly. So thank you so much. That's an awesome, thorough background that kind of paints a picture of how you arrived here. And I had a few questions to kind of follow up some of those things. The first thing you kind of mentioned that one of the major things that attracted you to Web3 in general was just recognizing the potential for blockchain to and decentralization to invite more input, essentially, but also to increase access to resources and offer maybe more of an equitable future. And whenever I talk to people who don't really know much about Web3, they just kind of assume like crypto, what they see in the news. It's hard to explain that piece to them, the access to resources that wouldn't otherwise be available to people. And I wonder if you saw any really excellent explanations when you talk to people like that, or if you kind of just like point them to certain resources to say like, this is a really great example of what is possible.
That's a really good question. I think a lot of what is being built on blockchain at the moment is very finance heavy. Like a lot of the more successful applications are finance focused. So like Uniswap, and all these different DACs and investment vehicles have become really successful. They don't really fully encompass I would say the extent of how this transparent ecosystem can allow individuals to engage and work with larger projects and entities in order to add towards their careers or their goals and stuff. But it does give a good hint of what is possible, right? I think the story of Uniswap, I might be wrong, but I think the story of Uniswap started off as like he got a grant for it, right? He applied via the Ethereum Foundation and got a grant, or a foundation. I'm not too sure on the particular foundation, but he got a grant, and from that was able to build out the first version of Uniswap and develop this DAO community, this community of other individuals to help him. And that's amazing. Like, I don't know if I don't know if that's ever happened before, where some random person on the internet, he doesn't have the quote unquote like qualifications that a lot of people expect when you're building out in the Web2 world, a startup, like a technology startup. but he was able to prove with action and building like a group of individuals around this idea to forward a solution that, I mean, it's a massive competitor to some of these huge centralized exchanges. That's amazing. Like in terms of volume, that's incredible. And it's built via like community efforts. And of course, like the foundation, there is a centralized entity in Uniswap, the Uniswap DAO, but you can still like get bounties and build important features just by looking at the GitHub and grabbing issues and tackling them. And that's amazing. That's the only, I'd say, example of a hint of the future of where I think like building on this transparent in this transparent ecosystem allows individuals to create something, have a huge impact on a lot of people and an entire industry.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so much more. I think people hear blockchain and they just kind of associate it with cryptocurrency. But the chief scientist that works at Metis, he kind of describes that as like the low hanging fruit of what's possible with blockchain. And so when I think people hear resources, they just think money, but so much more can be built into that. You know, an entire economy that has more actors than just like the vehicle of exchange, but also the people who are contributing the work for the goods, the services, the consumers. All of that can be migrated to a place where the market has been expanded and the gates of your Ivy League education or some certificate that you had to spend thousands of dollars on, suddenly they're not really there anymore. And if you can show up and prove that you're a self-motivated learner and you can contribute to something, then you can be rewarded in kind without needing to necessarily have like this whole Web2 resume, business degree background. It is really exciting.
Exactly. It's amazing. I mean, as somebody who's dabbled, well, I shouldn't say dabble. I've made like a portion of my career in like the Web2 space, and I've seen like not all the time that you should follow these like trends in a CV, in a resume. That can sometimes that can lead to a lot of false positives around like the success or how to like predict success, when in actuality what a good indicator of success is just a track record of doing things, just completing things. And a lot of people think, well, or CV does that, or like some good certificates or degrees or whatever it does do that. Yes, to a degree, but a large reason why it's not as effective as predicting success now is because a lot of that can be gamified. You can gamify a degree. You can gamify getting into certain companies. And what I mean by that is like there's literally like plans set out where individuals like create entire curriculum of how to get into like Google, right? You can just go on LeetCode as an engineer, get really good at like doing these algorithms on LeetCode, and then write up your CV in a way where it looks a certain way, and then you are eventually headhunted, or you can once you get to the interview stage, you've been prepped, and so in this way where you can then get into Google. I'm not saying it's still hard. It's still hard. Don't get me wrong. It's still hard. But then when you get into the company, you don't do this thing that you've sort of been like gamifying, right? So whereas in this Web3 space, in the crypto space, it's more about the pattern matching is like, okay, what have you built before? Like, what did you push to like get involved into? And your track record is like is actual substantial solutions, or even like smaller pieces to a bigger solution. It's all relevant, like your track record. And if you're brand new, there is an open opportunity. There's an opportunity to allow yourself to get in from ground zero and build. Like you can very clearly build from zero and like add these layers and blocks to your experience, and that is recognized via the communities around you. And I think that's a huge opportunity, because now you have individuals all around the world who are incredibly smart individuals who don't, they probably won't go to college, or they won't be in a certain like network or environment to allow themselves to gain access to these opportunities. Now they have, just via the internet. You could, I mean, this is a slightly different topic, but how many surgeons are there out there that probably like genius surgeons who can cure, all types of diseases and ailments, but they never get the access to do to learn the practice? Or how many genius coders out there who could probably crack AGI and they just didn't have access to the information? Or individuals who have the next business solution that allows, who knows, like autonomous vehicles to become mainstream in a cheap way. These are just examples, but allowing individuals to gain access to resources without pattern matching their background based on these, I guess, old world value systems is actually, it actually allows for more growth and freedom in the global economic sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like this link from education to economy is so often ignored when, in the United States, at least, our system for educating is extremely confined, and we're teaching very specific skills for a very specific type of citizen, and a lot of those skills, very few of them really transfer to how to be entrepreneurial, how to run a business, how to think outside the box, how to maybe not follow the rules all the time, how to do something differently. And none of that is really encouraged. And even when we get into like a higher education setting in countries where, that's a personal investment where I have to go into debt or spend thousands of dollars if I don't have access to scholarship or grant. And still to be kind of following along that same structure, it can be, I mean, it's a real gate, and for a lot of people it's inaccessible, and it doesn't really serve the way that they would be able to contribute the most value. So being able to just say, I've got access to this now, I've got opportunity, and now I can just prove what I'm capable of in a way that is unique to me, can be really powerful. So yeah, that's really exciting. And I know that a lot of organizations that are moving into Web3 or who want to kind of expand their business into blockchain, sourcing talent is a huge part of that. So, we're working on ways to develop the credentials so people can prove, like, in reputation power, these are the things that I can show that I've done. I've contributed to these projects. I've accomplished these things in these DAOs. So other people can go and kind of verify their reputation, but it's not the same as saying, I've got 15 years of experience working on a team. It's like, these are the outcomes that I've produced. And these are verified by other people in the space.
That's amazing, because there's so many individuals out there who don't have that traditional, credential, those traditional credentials, but who have worked in like great environments, especially in DAOs and in the Web3 space. They just need access, and once they have that visual representation of their work, then all of a sudden that access is opened up.
Yeah, I think a huge perk of that, like, even if you don't really see people like sharing your profile, it's kind of like your Web3 portfolio. You just share that link. Here you can kind of review the things that I've taken care of. Well, let's shift kind of back over. You mentioned something about 0 to 1 product model. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's so I didn't create this. As Peter Thiel, I think, pretty much popularized the concept, and the whole idea is just in a product lifecycle, you have 0 to 1, and then you have 1 to 100. 0 to 1 is that inception stage from idea to actual product, and the product, in order to get to 1, the product has to have a clear, viable use case. So just coding something and creating like or building something and creating a product is not enough to get it to 1. That's like more like getting it to 0.5, but actually figuring out product market fit and how to solve a problem that people actually have that can get you to 1. And I'm a big believer in not calling product market fit unless everything is breaking. Because I've been on teams where we have falsely identified what we thought product market fit was, and it wasn't. It just led you down a rabbit hole where nothing useful was, the actual problem that you were supposed to solve was missed. So that's how I look at going from 0 to 1.
Okay, I like this, and I think I'll probably weave back into this as we talk about more Chorus specific things. But let's kind of shift into just telling us what Chorus is, and then we can kind of talk a little bit more about what that development looks like and product market fit for Chorus.
Sure. Yeah, so Chorus is a DAC creation and management tool. And DACs are a subsidiary of DAOs. You're just replacing the organization with company or corporation. And the idea is that it's the best of both worlds from the DAO philosophy, but also from the Web 2 philosophy of what a company is. There's certain levels of hierarchy that you do need in companies. And the reason why you need it is because it allows for clear objectives and goals, and that creates fast-moving build processes. And that's one of the issues that current DAOs have. They're slow, very, very slow. There are exceptions to the rule. I think Uniswap was pretty fast in what they built, but that's because they quickly realized we need a core group of foundation developers and managers and folks that can set the direction and the narrative of where the application is going to go. So we help to facilitate that ability for individuals to create these DACs very quickly, manage them, and manage by means of proposals being developed on their DAC, tasks being set up and allocated to different individuals in the community, treasury management and creation, reputation management, and just keeping aware of the membership, the membership of the DAC. So the membership count, who's the admins, and who are core contributors to that DAC.
Nice. So yeah, I've definitely experienced the slowness or the inefficiency that can come in a decentralized project if you don't have some level of like centralized control, at least to start, because you've got a lot of people, too many cooks in the kitchen, so to speak, and you're not really sure which direction to go. And then many people have to like receive direct communication in order to like get started to move forward. So DACs or within Chorus, people would be able to form their own decentralized organizations and then say, okay, these are the tasks that need to get done. I'm assigning them to these people. And all of this is tracked so that now I can go back and see, okay, what did you contribute to and how can I, loop that into your reputation on chain?
Yep.
Very cool. So what would you say, apart from just like inefficiencies with task delegation and getting a diverse and spread out group of people to kind of row in the same direction, what would you say are some other challenges of DAOs that Chorus kind of supports in the DAC structure?
Yes. So one of the main things that we're trying to clearly solve is, and it's something that we're debating on whether this should be a feature that we do sooner rather than later, but it's around the legal structure of DAOs, because that's a big issue right now. Nobody knows where exactly they should register their company, how they should register it, what are the future impacts of registering it as whatever new legal entity gets created in the United States or in Singapore or wherever else people say that it's the best place to register a DAO. And that's one of the things that we want to solve. And we're actually looking at figuring out how that would look feature-wise at the moment. So I think that's a really big step, because if you can clarify the idea of, if you can clarify the DAC concept legally, that'll open up the gateway of allowing individuals to come together and to create these entities really easily and manage them and create jobs and create solutions to important problems, whether it's local solutions or global solutions. I think these sort of community objectives can be built around something as small as just like keeping your community safe, or like building projects in your local space, to as big as building companies that tackle billion-dollar problems.
What would you say, like, considering the learning curve of moving from like a Web 2 environment to a Web 3 environment, beyond just the organizational challenges that are present in any company, what would you say are like the biggest obstacles for people who maybe already have a business or who are working in Web 2 to figure out some Web 3 integration or to make the transition into Web 3?
Yeah. So I think when you're moving from the Web 2 space, especially as founders or management of a Web 2 product, there's a lot of expectation around the speed of how things get completed. And that is something that you have to manage currently with the current tool sets out there. And it's understandable when you're working with, individuals who aren't set on the quote unquote 9 to 5. Everybody has their own individual schedules. They have their own unique processes, and you can delegate, right? I've seen it in Discords and DAO communities where they recommend that a certain individual will do this task, but not all the time that individual will be able to work at the speed that you require. So that's one thing you have to manage expectations around if going from, and at least in the current environment, like right now, from going from like a Web 2 to like to a DAO. But with Chorus, we hopefully will solve that and allow you to make that transition a lot more seamless, where you can create open tasks that allow, the same way how in the open source community, there's certain repositories or projects that have this thriving ecosystem of builders who tackle issues around a project that they care about. We want to bring that seamlessly to DACs.
Nice. So for a lot of projects, that's going to mean, having a pretty strong foothold on their community growth and development. Is there anything within Chorus that would support that community? Like if they don't have access to a large group of developers and they have some development tasks that they need to delegate or invite input on, is there any like cross DAC collaboration involved, or a resource within Chorus that those people could seek out?
Well, in the future roadmap, we are looking at allowing you to open up tasks so they can become public, right? So anybody, almost like a job board on Upwork, where you can get, or I think Braintree or Brain Trust, I think they're the freelance network, where you can find jobs based on, and they can have like a reputation threshold where you can find jobs and quickly take them on, so you can complete them, and they'll be open. an open marketplace of these jobs. That should allow the communities, the projects that maybe don't have a quote unquote community focused product, to allow them to still participate as a DAC.
Nice. So I also wonder then about the product market fit that we kind of talked about. So as you're doing the research to kind of see, what is it from a one-to-one customer level? What is it that you need, and how are we solving that problem? What has that process looked like for Chorus? And do you have any suggestions in general for people who want to start a decentralized company but don't know really where to start in terms of engaging with prospective clients?
Yeah. So one of the big issues that we've had for a long time in Web3 or in crypto is that we've figured out this really cool financial incentive that allows you to reward community members. And the problem is we've reversed it. We've reversed the cycle. So we used to reward community members in the early stages of crypto before anything is built. And that's really dangerous, because that creates a feedback loop of individuals that don't really care too much about the product. They care more about the asset. But it was a great experiment because it did show that there is an opportunity here to engage people, engage mature community members, and allow them to feel more rewarded. And that creates a super class of users if done right. So this is what I've in the traditional Web2 space. What you do is you find these fanatic users in the early stages of your product, right? Even before you write a line of code, you spend a lot of time investigating users. Maybe it's from your experience, someplace you've worked, or maybe you're just diving deep into a subreddit thread and you're trying to figure out what problem people are having, and you put the pieces together, and the gold nuggets show up when you begin to have these conversations with individuals and you create a pattern around the product, around that problem. Sorry. I still believe that this process is really relevant in Web3, extremely relevant. Where I think this idea of rewarding users to create a superclass of users is when your product is not at product market fit, but maybe as close to that mature stage where you have individuals who have engaged with your product for a very, very long time. When I say a long time, I mean, if you want to put a time frame on it, I would say like 2, 3, 4 years maybe. And then at that point, when you reward users, they become so, I guess, the word I'm looking for is they become a fan of your product, a super fan, and they really stick by, and you can extract a lot of important feedback around your product from those individuals if that community is catered right. So, okay, so no product has 2, 3, 4 years to spend, right? So I would see that as like something you do later on, rewarding the community. I'm appreciating that there's a lot more dApps and applications in the Web3 space now that aren't rewarding users right away. And that's important, because what that's going to do is it's going to clear up what problem you're focusing on. Really, it's going to clear up the answers you don't want to find, but you need to, and the answers you want to find very, very quickly. So with us, what we've been doing in particular is, my first objective was to clarify how do we improve the user experience for these DAO managers. And one of the first things I did was arrange calls with as many DAO managers as I knew. And I jumped on these calls and I gave them the first version of the product. And I would just sit on these calls with them and not say anything except for like these broad objectives that I would state. So create a DAC, send some funds, create some tasks, delegate those tasks, and then I would just be quiet and just watch them until they struggled. It was pretty awkward, but it was really important because we learned a lot about the product and what needed to be improved and what they gravitated to naturally. And this, I think, is really important for all Web3 products. The idea that the only difference that I see at the moment between a Web3 product and a Web2 product, other than the decentralization aspect, is that there is an opportunity to reward users, but that should be placed way down the line. And your community will thank you for that, because once you build a useful product, that is far more important than just creating hype.
Absolutely. I think my background is in education. So everything that I hear, that's the lens that it automatically runs through. But I was just thinking about like baseline levels of assessment that I would do with students. And instead of asking them like more pointed questions or providing any instruction and then a question, which might lead them to some performative answer or trying to like think too much about what I'm trying to get at because they feel like they're being assessed, but really I'm trying to measure like where does my starting point for work begin? Just asking them to complete a task and then noting what the problems are. That's it. That's an awesome application. I've never considered it in another setting besides like teaching kids to read, but that's awesome. So
yeah, it's all about just learning why your users are using your product or how they're going to use it. And people try to overcomplicate some aspects of product design or understanding users or finding that product market fit. They try to overcomplicate it by maybe adding more code, adding more features, adding more stuff that acts mainly as like a paint over the real problem that you're trying to solve. And if you just sit back and listen and just get into those uncomfortable environments where you're talking to the users and trying to understand exactly the what, the why, and the how, there's a lot of valuable information there that can help you understand the problem that you're trying to solve.
Absolutely. So we've kind of talked a little bit about how Chorus provides solutions for kind of the easy onboarding and inclusion of contributors in a decentralized space. But are there any other use cases that you're particularly excited to see be developed or that you think will be particularly useful for businesses?
I think looking at the features all in one space. So being able to have treasury management, task management, voting on proposals, having that all in one space and one easy to view application. That in itself is like super powerful that I'm looking forward to. Because at the moment it's fragmented in the DAO space. You use Snapshot for one thing, you use Gnosis for another, you use all these different platforms for different things, but having this one environment where you can see these essential aspects of a DAC or DAO I'm really excited to see how that looks in the hands of like large scale DAOs.
Yeah, I would imagine, especially for projects that are trying to break into Web3, but maybe have some established history in Web2 or whatever the case may be. I think that switching between tabs and having to learn all these different platforms and these different tools to do different functions, it's so time consuming. And so being able to have everything in one place and it to be very intuitive and user friendly saves a lot of time. And again, with being able to onboard more people based on their experience and credentials, and then just task management being kind of the name of the game instead of, this is a company and I'm going to onboard you and you get a salary. It's your contributions. are met in kind. I think a huge advantage because a project's runway is having to hire a team to get things done. And it's not uncommon for people who have a wonderful product mind or who are incredible developers or who built something really amazing. They may not have the business acumen or the hiring and firing kind of knowledge to understand what really does make a good fit for my team. And so every time you make that mistake, you have to hire or fire somebody again, or kind of rework your team. That eats up time and resources. So for small, I could see this being extremely helpful in terms of scaling quickly, because now so much is not eaten up by this trial and error process. So let's move into kind of barriers that you might see for general DAC governance, or kind of the ways that you're being proactive about the continuous development of Chorus, and just kind of thinking about what might be a problem down the road.
So I know I touched on it earlier before, but I believe the regulatory aspect around DACs, that's a problem that needs to be solved. I think adding clarity around that is really important. And what I would like to focus on in the next 6 months is adding some sort of guidelines or framework that allows DACs and DAOs to it eases their mind around their organization and / corporation. So that's, I would say, like that's a major thing, that it's the elephant in the room, I would say, when it comes to the future of DAOs. Like, how do we make sure that we still maintain the same decentralization, that we appreciate the openness, all of the access to resources, but at the same time, you don't have some major pushback around how you're paid as a contributor, that, or like some sort of barrier that doesn't make it feasible as a DAO to distribute tasks. That is something that needs to be that needs to be solved, and that can be solved. There are people out there who are looking to solve that. As there's platforms such as WorkDAO, who their big focus is just trying to understand, is basically allowing DAOs to form these legal entities. I think Dula also partners with a few companies to allow them to do the same. So there's definitely solutions out there, and I'm excited to work on that at Chorus to improve that, because that's going to be something that we have to solve if we want to make it easier to create and manage DACs.
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially this year, just seeing so many regulatory headlines and scam headlines, people are probably a little more nervous than they might have been before. And I'm definitely not an expert in anything regulatory or anything like that, but I did listen to someone who is talk about how it's really important to understand the jurisdiction that you're working in, because if you don't choose one, and you don't choose the right one, then you could put yourself open to the regulation in every jurisdiction. And so then you really don't know what rules you're following, what rules you're not. And so there's a lot to be hashed out there, but it's nice to know that there are definitely people who identify that and are working on it, and qualified professionals who can provide some guidance so that people understand what they're going into up front and can make most informed decisions.
Definitely. I mean, even the individuals who we've partnered with at Chorus, we've tried to make sure that we have people on board who are up to date with all these things and completely aware of the best routes to take and how we can integrate that into tech to allow DAOs and to benefit from it. That's the name of the game here. We're just trying to make it so that you can you can have your DAC, and it doesn't mean that you now have this new set of worries other than finding product market fit, because that's like the main worry right now, like figuring out if what the individuals that you've got together and you've got this community and you're trying to solve this problem, that's the main focus, not what taxes you have to pay and what if you're doing the right thing, or in terms of like where you're registered and all this other stuff. That's nobody wants to think of that. So
how am I going to get salary payments to these people if those questions for regular administrative tasks could be a little more automated, a little less like formatted for a workflow, then focusing on the creativity could really be freed up, which is what's important.
Exactly.
Well, are there any other developments or kind of roadmap milestones that you want to mention that people should be looking out for, or anything else that we should have a heads up on from Chorus?
Other than what I've mentioned previously, we're now in the phase of going from we're going into our alpha launch, so a lot of our socials are now starting to go live. We're also, and in that we're going to start bringing on we're going to set up our whitelist so that in the management of DAOs and those who contribute to DAOs can begin to sign up. And in that stage, I don't know how much I'm supposed to give away, but we're
before we share.
So okay, so we are definitely setting up a competition. We're setting up a competition to allow you to vote on your DAO that you want to bring onto Chorus, and that's going to be our alpha release. Our beta release is going to be via our partners, and in those partners are going to be individuals that got voted on via the whitelist. And after that, that's probably like 4 months down the line, is going to be the open release, which is anybody can use Chorus. And each stage I'm excited for and nervous for. So
a lot to learn along the way, right? But
yeah,
that's the exciting thing. I remember in grad school, I had to do this larger management project where we essentially created a solution for a crisis that was in society. And I got charged with like the housing crisis in Detroit in like 2010, which there are no solutions. I was so overwhelmed by like, people are upside down on their mortgages. Why would they want to save their homes? But I remember just the question that we kept coming up with all these fantastic ideas and going through this whole like system and organizational structure and program offerings. But we continued to blow past this question of, do people want this? And I think that's a pretty common thing to do, especially when you have so many people in a space who are excited to create and innovate, that we don't stop and say like, how is this serving? So I love that that's kind of like the focus of your work at Chorus, is how is this serving the people, and is this really offering a solution? And I think that will be really helpful to any DACs that are built with Chorus moving forward.
Yeah, I agree. I try to be as close to the motherboard as I can, so as close to the ground. Even in our community that we're setting up, I'm going to make sure to be in the Discord community and there to speak to individuals one-to-one if needed. And it's important to be as close to the user as possible so that you can figure out the problem. You can add clarity, and just learning it once isn't enough. It's a continuous process. It's a continuous cycle. Even though you've figured out the pattern of the problem you're solving, you have to make sure that you're continuously in that loop so that you're always synced with the problem that you're solving and you're always aware. Because as soon as you lose track, it's similar to navigating a ship. A small degree, left or right, and suddenly you're completely off course of 60 miles down the line. So yeah, I'm definitely trying to keep as close to the users as possible.
Awesome. Well, we'll look forward to seeing more coming out of Chorus, and I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today. Thank you so much.
No, thank you for having me. It was fun and scary at the same time.